Effective immediately, Nathan Cole is no longer part of Coleman Precision Works. We thank him for his years of service. Applause, Mr. Cole. Any comment before you go? I'm here, boss. Fire every one of them. Understood. I'm on it. Nobody in that auditorium, watching a single dad carry one cardboard box past 300 silent coworkers and out into the cold November rain, knew the truth. This counterstrike had been moving in total silence for 11 months. The polished CEO, smiling on that stage, the one the trade magazines called untouchable, had 6 hours left. By 5 o'clock, she would learn exactly what she had just lost and exactly who had been in control the whole time. She thought she had fired an aging consultant with a contractor badge. She had just fired the only man in the building who owned every share she was about to sell. Have you ever been mistaken for the smallest person in a room you built? Stay with me. In 6 hours, that mistake gets a price tag. His name is Nathan Cole. He's 44 years old. And until 8 months ago, he believed one simple thing. If you build something quietly enough, the truth will always be louder than the people taking credit for it. He was wrong about the loud part. He was right about everything else. Let's go back to the morning it came apart, because it started like every other morning of his life. 5:35 a.m. Pittsburgh. The sky the color of wet concrete. Nathan stood in a kitchen that smelled like butter and coffee, flipping pancakes while down the hall his son Milo negotiated with a drawer full of dinosaur socks. Milo is 6. He believes 3 things with his whole heart. That the Triceratops is objectively the best dinosaur. That pancakes taste better when they're shaped like one. And that his dad is just a quiet guy who fixes machines. 2 of those 3 things are true. That Friday, Nathan cut the pancake into a Triceratops, banana slices for the frill, and slid a folded note into the lunchbox. Same as every day. That one said, be brave. Be kind. Horns up, buddy. Milo can't read all the words yet. His teacher says he makes her read them to him twice every lunch like scripture. At 7:40, Nathan dropped him at first grade and watch him run for the doors, backpack bouncing, 1 sock green and 1 sock orange because matching is a rule and 6-year-olds are lawyers. Then he drove 25 minutes to a plan-off Route 51 with his name once carved over the entrance and a contractor badge in his pocket that said he barely belonged inside it. You need to understand how a man ends up in that position on purpose. Nathan's father was a toolmaker. 29 years at a shop outside Homestead. Hands like cracked leather. He used to say, the press doesn't care what you tell it. It only cares what you do with your hands. Nathan was better than him at 20, and the old man said so out loud once, which in that house was a parade. 16 years ago, Nathan started Coleman Precision Works in a rented garage bay with a used CNC lathe, a borrowed welder, and a stubborn friend named Sal, who worked the first 7 weeks for nothing but sandwiches and faith. They machine parts that aren't allowed to fail. Aerospace fittings, orthopedic implants, pieces where a flaw thinner than a human hair gets somebody killed. Precision was the product. Quiet was the culture. 10 years in, the company had 280 employees and a lobby wall with a photograph of that garage bay hanging by the door. Elena found him at year 5. She was the loan officer the bank sent to decide if the little shop deserved a bigger line of credit. She looked past the numbers at Nathan's scarred hands and approved it anyway. He married her 2 years later. She used to fall asleep on his shoulder with spreadsheets still open. When Milo was born, she cried about his tiny fingernails. Perfect little machine parts, she said. Nobody made Nathan laugh like that woman. When Milo was 1, she got sick. The illness doesn't get a name here. It doesn't deserve the syllables. She fought for 14 months, and then it was just Nathan, a baby monitor, and a company that suddenly meant a lot less than everyone assumed it did. Here's the math he did at her funeral. A company can survive without your face. A 1-year-old cannot. So Nathan did something his lawyer called eccentric and his accountant called insane. He stepped down as CEO. He moved every share he controlled, 61, into a family trust carrying his wife's and son's initials, the E.M. Cole Trust. On paper, the majority owner of the company stopped being a man and became a name in a filing drawer in Harrisburg. Sole trustee, sole signature, his. But you'd need a subpoena to find that out. Nobody looked. Then he hired his own replacement, Adriana Voss. Ivy League polish, a headhunter's crown jewel, a smile built for trade magazine covers and quarterly calls. Nathan hired her because she was everything he wasn't, camera-ready, fluent in the language of capital. The deal in his head was simple. She runs the boardroom. He keeps the machines honest as a consultant. And he's in the school pickup line by 3:15. New hires called him Nathan from engineering. He liked it that way. The only person who still remembered was Diane Marsh, the controller. 59 years old, reading glasses on a beaded chain, keeper of the books since the garage bay. She still called him boss when nobody was listening. For 3 years, Nathan corrected her every time. 8 months ago, he stopped correcting her. Because the thing about handing someone your spotlight is this. Some people hold it for you. Some people start believing they built the sun. People ask how a man loses his own company without noticing. The honest answer is he doesn't notice. He just notices in millimeters. In Nathan's trade, there's a word for that. Drift. A machine can drift out of tolerance so slowly that every single day looks normal. And the part it finally ruins looks like an accident. It never was. Adriana's first year, give her credit, was good. Revenue up, new contracts, cameras in the lobby twice a month. Nathan told himself the noise was the point. He'd hired a spotlight, and spotlights get warm. The drift started in year 2. It started with the walls. A rebrand, she called it. Fresh paint, glass partitions, a heritage wall redesign in the lobby. When the contractors finished, the photograph of the garage bay, the one with Sal leaning on a borrowed welder and Nathan squinting into the sun like an idiot, was gone. Nathan found it 3 weeks later in a storage room, face down in a box-marked archive. He stood there holding it for a long time. Then he put it back in the box. He told himself, a picture is not a company. Then it was the story. One Tuesday, Nathan stopped for gas and saw her face on the rack by the register. Steel City executive, glossy as a showroom hood. The woman who built Coleman Precision. He read the article standing next to the wiper fluid. 9 pages. His name appeared 0 times. Sal's name appeared 0 times. The garage bay had become humble local origins. Nathan paid for his coffee, drove to work, and said nothing. By year 3, the new hire orientation video said the company was founded by a small local team and transformed by visionary leadership. Nathan watched 23-year-olds nod along to it. One of them, a sweet kid in quality control, actually explained the company's history to its own founder in the break room. Adriana built this place from nothing. She's incredible. Nathan refilled his coffee and agreed she was something. You want to know why he stayed quiet? Part of it was the plan. Quiet was the deal he'd made with himself at a funeral. But part of it, let's be straight, was pride dressed up as patience. Nathan didn't need credit. He needed the pickup line by 3:15. That math still worked. Right up until the Thursday it didn't. Quarterly operations review, 11 people, 1 long table. Adriana at the head in a suit the color of fresh cream. Her pen was a heavy silver thing she clicked when she wanted the room's attention, and the room had learned that sound like a dinner bell. Agenda item 5 was a supplier switch on the cobalt alloy used for orthopedic implants. New vendor, 16 savings, missing 2 fatigue certifications. Nathan flagged it politely, the way you flag a gas leak. She let him finish. Then she smiled the smile the trade press loved, looked around the table, and said, for those who haven't met him, Nathan is a consultant. He consults on machines. A pause, time like a comedian's. Nathan, sweetheart, the certifications are a formality. This is why legacy overhead is a line item I keep having to defend. Legacy overhead. The room did that thing rooms do. A few people laughed because she was watching them laugh. A few stared at their notepads. Nathan looked at her for a moment and saw something he hadn't let himself see before. She wasn't cutting costs. She was performing in execution, and he was the prop. He didn't argue. A man who has spent his whole life on shop floors knows you don't want to fight with a spinning blade by yelling at it. You cut the power. So he said, noted, and wrote one word on his legal pad. The word was drift. After the meeting, a project manager caught up to him by the elevators, checked the hallway both ways like someone crossing traffic, and whispered that he was sorry about all that. That's what fear smells like in a company. Apologies delivered like contraband. Nathan told him he had nothing to be sorry for. Then he went down to the floor and quietly flagged every lot from the new COBOL supplier for double inspection under his own authorization code. If she wanted to gamble with money, fine. Nobody gambles with a hip replacement. That night, he stayed late. Empty floor, one desk lamp, a stack of vendor invoices, and a red pen. Coffee going cold beside him. If she wanted to call him overhead, fine. Overhead reads everything. It took 5 hours to find it. A vendor called Beacon Strategic Partners. Market positioning support, stakeholder alignment, $28,000 a month, no deliverables, no work product, no contact name anyone had ever heard of. The billing had started small 2 years back and grown like a tumor. Total so far, $1.3 million. And the dates told their own story. Every invoice spiked in the weeks before a board meeting, like somebody topping off a war chest right before the general sat down. Nathan traced the address through 2 LLC filings, the way you trace a bad wire through a wall. The trail ended at a registered agent, and behind the agent, a condo in Sewickley. He knew the name on the deed before he finished typing it. Marcus Voss, Adriana's younger brother, the man who'd toasted family at the company holiday party with Nathan's champagne in his hand. Nathan sat in that empty office and felt something worth describing carefully, because you've probably felt it too. Not rage. Rage is loud. This was quieter and heavier, like watching a slow leak in a roof you framed with your own hands. Rage makes a man stupid. This thing made him precise. Monday morning, he asked Diane to stay after the payroll run. He closed the door. I need you to start keeping records. Real-time sheets, real invoices, everything dated, backed up twice, nowhere near the company's servers. Diane looked at him over those reading glasses for a long second. She didn't ask what he'd found. She asked, how far back do you want me to go? As far as it takes. What they built over the next months wasn't revenge. Be clear about that, because it matters for what comes later. It was documentation. A blue notebook that never touched a network. Certified copies. A fireproof box in a storage unit rented under his late mother's maiden name. Every inflated invoice cross-referenced against real vendor pricing. Every backup logged twice. And while they worked, the drift kept drifting, almost like the building could smell what Nathan knew. His badge died on a Tuesday. Just stopped working at the turnstile. That little refusal beep while a line formed behind him. Ray at the security desk, a man who'd known Nathan since the garage bay, went gray with embarrassment as he printed a visitor sticker. Visitor in block letters on the shirt of the man who built the place. Clerical error, said the email. The error took 8 days to fix. Then the apprenticeship program went away. Nathan had started it in year 4 and quietly named it for his father, the toolmaker. 6 kids a year from trade schools paid, Minthert hired. Adriana relaunched it at a press event as the Voss Fellows. New logo, same kids, her name where the old toolmakers used to be. Nathan watched the ribbon cutting from the back and kept his face like a poured slab. Then came Investor Day. Lights down, music up. Slide 32 of her keynote was Nathan's vibration damping fixture. His design, his patent, the one framed in his basement. On the screen it said, "Innovation delivered," over her silhouette. The room applauded. She bowed her head, humble as a queen at her own coronation. Nathan clapped too. The press doesn't care what you tell it. It cares what you do with your hands. But here's the moment that turned a leak into a war. It came for Diane 3 weeks later, on a Sunday, by burner text, because by then they'd stopped trusting the building. Someone in the CEO's office had been pulling documents, not money documents, ownership documents. The full capitalization table, every version back to founding. Filings about the EM Coal Trust. 2 formal requests to the law firm in Harrisburg, both declined. And for exactly 35 minutes that Friday, misfiled on a shared drive before someone yanked it back, a banker's deck stamped confidential. Diane got screenshots of every page. The deck had a name, Project Horizon. Nathan read it at his kitchen table after Milo was asleep, and his hands went cold at page 7. Ashford Capital, a private equity firm out of Chicago, in quiet talks to acquire the dormant estate stake, 61 of Coleman Precision Works. The deck described the seller as a passive family trust managed by disinterested trustees, likely a motivated seller at the right discount. There was even a chart projecting how cheap the stake could get if margins kept sliding. Margins. She was bleeding herself, 28,000 at a time. She had found the trust. She'd looked straight at a dead woman's initials and a 6-year-old's inheritance, and she'd read it as an abandoned safe nobody had the combination too. She wasn't skimming anymore. She was selling a whole machine, and she thought the owner was a ghost. She was half right. There was a ghost in that building. It just wasn't Elena. It was Nathan Cole, and ghosts see everything. The next 11 months of Nathan's life looked boring from the outside. That was the design. Monday through Friday, he was Nathan from engineering, the quiet consultant with the visitor-grade badge, nodding in hallways, fixing fixtures, eating lunch alone by the loading dock. Nights and weekends, he was something else. He and Diane built a case the way you build an aerospace part, slowly, to spec, with documentation for every cut. The blue notebook filled up. Real vendor quotes laid against Beacon's invoices, line by line, showing the padding in black and red. Purchase orders approved out of sequence. A warehouse lease the company paid on a building that, as far as county records could tell, was a gravel lot. And then the emails, deleted but not gone, because nothing is ever gone if the backup tapes were set up by a man who doesn't trust software. Nathan had built those retention systems himself, back when he signed the checks. One thread between Adriana and Marcus, 7 months old, ended with a sentence Nathan must have read 50 times. Keep it quiet until the trust stay clears. After that, none of it matters. Hold that sentence. We'll come back to it. He hired Eleanor Pratt that same week, the attorney in Harrisburg who administers the filings for the E.M. Cole Trust. A calm, gray-eyed woman who bills in 6-minute increments and has never once raised her voice in Nathan's presence. He told her everything. She listened the way surgeons listen, then said 2 things. First, that Pennsylvania is a one-party consent state, so Nathan could lawfully record any conversation he was part of. Second, that he should buy a very good recorder. He bought 2. One lived in his jacket pocket. The other lived in his truck, in case the day ever came when the jacket didn't make it out of the building. Then came a Thursday that still wakes him up some nights. Eleanor called his cell at 4 in the afternoon. Her voice was flat, in the way that means a lawyer is being careful. Nathan, I need you to tell me if you signed a delegation of voting authority in April 3 years ago. Nathan stood very still in his kitchen. I've never signed a delegation. Then someone signed it for you, she said. It arrived by courier today. Backdated. Notarized by a notary whose commission expired. It names the company's chief executive as authorized proxy for the trust's shares. And it carries your signature. Not a forgery scrawl by hand. A perfect one because it came from a stamp. Back when Nathan was still CEO, the company ordered a signature stamp for high-volume purchasing paperwork. Standard thing. Thousands of companies have one. It had been sitting in the executive office safe for 4 years, in a drawer he no longer had a key to, 2 feet from where Adriana Voss hung her cream-colored blazers. Forgery is not a small word. It is not a misunderstanding you talk through over dinner. It is a decision somebody makes deliberately, believing the other person will never look closely enough to catch it. She had looked at a dead wife's initials on a trust, decided the man behind them was too small to check, and pressed his own name on a paper like it was a tool she'd found lying around her office. That night, Nathan drove out along the river, parked facing the water, a barge horn somewhere downstream. He thought about Elena's laptop, still in the closet because he couldn't donate it. He thought about his father's hands. And here is something he never told anyone. Not Diane, not Eleanor, not even Elena when she was alive. 6 years ago, the company hit a wall. A customer went bankrupt owing $1.6 million, and payroll was 8 days from bouncing for 180 families. Nathan didn't call a bank. Banks take weeks. He sold his father's machines, the press, the mill, the tools the old man had oiled every Sunday of Nathan's childhood, to a collector in Erie. Then he took a second mortgage on his house, the house Elena picked, the house Milo sleeps in now. He wired all of it into the company through a bridge account and told everyone they'd landed an early payment. Payroll cleared. Nobody ever knew. The collector sent a photo of the press afterward, polished like a museum piece under showroom lights. Nathan couldn't make himself look at it twice. You do things like that quietly because you don't want the people you protect to feel the weight. That's what he told himself. Sitting by that river, he finally heard the other half of the truth. If nobody ever sees you carry the load, somebody will eventually decide you never carried anything at all. Adriana said the quiet part out loud a month later at the company's 16th anniversary gala downtown. Chandeliers and a jazz trio and champagne Nathan was paying for in a very real sense. She found it by the bar, floor-length silver dress, that trade magazine smile at full wattage. She touched her glass to his and said, in a voice as warm as bathwater, "I want you to know I don't hate you, Nathan. Companies like this get built by men like you and run by people like me. You were never the brains here, sweetheart. You were the muscle. We photographed well." The recorder in Nathan's breast pocket was running. Pennsylvania is a one-party consent state. He looked at her for a moment. The band played. Somewhere behind her, Marcus was laughing with two board members, telling a story with his hands. And the last soft thing in Nathan Cole closed up shop. "That's a hell of a toast," he said, raised his glass, and walked away. She thought she'd won the exchange. People like her always count silence as surrender. Here's what she was actually doing while the band played, bleeding the patient to buy it cheaper. The Beacon invoices had doubled. 2 contracts got repriced into the red on purpose. And in October, a restructuring memo leaked onto the shop floor with 55 names penciled for layoff. Nathan read the list in the break room with his coffee going cold. Sal's name was 9th. The welder who worked 7 weeks for sandwiches, whose daughter is at Penn State on the tuition program Nathan started. That list was Adriana lowering the company's price tag with a red pen, 55 families at a time. That's when Nathan stopped being a man gathering evidence and became a man choosing a date. Diane found the date for him. A calendar invite forwarded through 3 assistants. Project Horizon signing ceremony. Friday, 5 o'clock, 11th floor boardroom. Ashford Capital was flying in. The Forge delegation would let Adriana vote the trust's shares in favor. Wire transfers queued for Monday. After that, none of it matters. Now you know what that sentence meant. Once the sale closed and the money crossed state lines, unwinding it would take years. Nathan might not win. So Eleanor prepared the paperwork through 2 sleepless nights, revocations, certifications, a criminal referral packet with a blue notebook scanned cover to cover. Everything dated, sealed, ready to fire. The plan was to serve it all Friday morning, quiet and surgical before the ceremony. Adriana changed the schedule. Friday morning, she called an all-hands town hall. Every employee, every site on the live stream. Rain hammering the parking lot, the auditorium smelling like wet coats and burnt coffee. She stood on stage in cream and pearls and announced a transformational partnership with Ashford Capital. Applause, beautiful and thin. Then, with the cameras rolling, she looked down at her cards and smiled like a woman opening a gift she'd wrapped herself. And as we turn this page, some legacy relationships conclude. Effective immediately, Nathan Cole is no longer part of Coleman Precision Works. We thank him for his years of service. 300 heads turned. A camera found Nathan against the back wall, between a forklift trophy case and a fire extinguisher. Security was already moving, 2 guys he'd trained on evacuation drills, so ashamed they couldn't look up from the floor tiles. Somebody's phone was streaming, and a young site reporter from the company channel actually pushed a microphone toward him and asked if he had any comment on his way out. Understand this about that moment. Nathan wasn't crying. He wasn't shouting. His heart rate barely moved. And that wasn't toughness. It was arithmetic. She had just fired him in front of every witness in the company, on camera, 6 hours before she needed nobody looking at her. She had also just handed him the cleanest stage a Counter-Strike ever gets. On his way out, he stopped at the storage room and took one thing. A photograph, face down in a box marked archive. Sal, a borrowed welder, the garage bay, the sun. Then he stood under the awning, rain coming down like rivets, took out his phone and called Diane. She picked up on the second ring, and through the glass he watched Adriana up on her stage, shaking hands with a man from Chicago. Fire every one of them, he said. A pause. Not surprise. The quiet of a woman who had been waiting 11 months to hear exactly those 4 words. Understood, Diane said. I'm on it. He hung up, called Mrs. Ortega next door, and asked her to grab Milo from school and start the pancakes without him, because Friday is pancake night and some contracts don't get broken. Then he looked at his watch. 10:11. The signing ceremony was at 5 o'clock. 6 hours. 11 months. 1 stamp with his name on it. Time to go collect his company. At 4:40 that afternoon, the 11th floor boardroom looked like a magazine spread. Rain streaking the glass wall. Catering nobody touched. Ashford Capital on one side of the table, 3 lawyers deep, fountain pens lined up like surgical tools. Adriana at the head, cream suit, pearls the silver pen. Marcus lounged 2 seats down, tie loosened, wearing the confidence of a man who believed the hard part was over. The signature pages sat in the middle of the table in little flagged stacks. 61 of Nathan Cole's life dressed up in tabs that said sign here. Nathan rode the elevator watching the floors climb, wearing the same rain-damp jacket she'd fired him in. Eleanor Pratt stood on his left with a litigation case. Diane stood on his right, holding a thin folder and a flash drive, reading glasses pushed up in her hair like she meant business. The doors opened. The 2 security guards from that morning were posted at the boardroom entrance. The taller one looked at Nathan, looked at Eleanor, and stepped aside like a man grateful for the excuse. They walked in mid-sentence. Adriana's sentence. It died in the air. For 1 full second, nobody moved. Then the silver pen clicked twice fast. Nathan. Her voice went for boardroom and almost made it. You can't be in this building. You were separated this morning. Gentlemen, I apologize. This is an ex-contractor with hurt feelings. Security. Neither guard moved. Loyalty or curiosity, either one did the job. Eleanor set her case on the table, unhurried as always. Good afternoon. Eleanor Pratt, counsel for the E.M. Cole Trust. Here's the detail Nathan will remember until he's old. Adriana relaxed. She actually smiled and gestured an empty chair, because in her version of the world, the trust lawyer showing up meant the seller had come to close. Wonderful. We were told the trustees preferred to sign remotely. There are no trustees, Eleanor said. There is one trustee. She let that hang a beat. Before we address that, a housekeeping question for the record. Ms. Voss, this transaction relies on a delegation of voting authority executed in April 3 years ago. Who signed it? The lead lawyer looked up. Lawyers can smell weather changing before anyone else in the room. The trustee of record signed it, Adriana said. It's in the data room. Certified by a notary whose commission expired 16 months before the date on the page, Eleanor said, laying a single sheet down like a card she'd held all night. Which is difficult. And signed with a signature stamp stored in this building's executive safe, which is worse. The trust has never delegated anything to anyone. I know that with unusual confidence, because the sole trustee is standing to my left. Every head in the room rotated to Nathan, the wet consultant, the legacy overhead, the muscle. Nathan Cole, Eleanor said, sole trustee of the E.M. Cole Trust, sole signatory on its shares, legal guardian of its beneficiary, owner through the trust of 61 of Coleman Precision Works. The stake you gentlemen flew in to purchase this afternoon belongs to the man Ms. Voss had escorted off the property at 11 o'clock this morning, on your own live stream. Silence has a weight. Nathan had read that in the blue notebook months earlier in his own handwriting, and now he finally got to feel it from the good side of the table. Adriana laughed. One short note, the kind that's supposed to invite the room to laugh along. The room declined. That's absurd. The trust is Elena Cole's estate. It's managed by attorneys. Nathan was an engineering consultant. He fixes machines. She looked at the Ashford partners, and her polish cracked right down the middle. He's the muscle. That's all he's ever been. Ask anyone. She turned on Eleanor. Your firm refused to name the trustee. Twice. A stake nobody claims is a stake nobody's watching. Any buyer would assume. Assumptions aren't due diligence, Ms. Voss, Eleanor said. They're confessions with better posture. Play it, Nathan said quietly. Diane plugged the flash drive into the room console, and Adriana Voss's own voice filled her own boardroom, warm as bathwater over her own speakers. You were never the brains here, sweetheart. You were the muscle. We photographed well. Her face went the color of her suit. You're right about one thing, Nathan said, his voice level because 11 months buys a man level. I'm a muscle. This morning, you fire the muscle in front of 300 people. This afternoon, the muscle owns every share in this room. The Ashford partner closed his leather portfolio. It made a small click, and that click was the loudest sound of the day. A deal dying doesn't sound like thunder. It sounds like a folder closing. Ms. Voss, he said, standing, buttoning his jacket. Ashford was presented a clean cellar and clean books. We appear to have neither. We're withdrawing. Our counsel will follow up regarding representations made to our fund. His eyes flicked to the forged delegation, then to her. Personally made. Eleanor slid one last envelope down the table. Adriana stopped it with 2 fingers like it might bite. Notice of an emergency session of the board of directors. 7 o'clock tonight. The trust, holding 61, has already voted its shares. You are suspended as chief executive, effective immediately, pending review of the items in that envelope. Effective immediately. Nathan didn't choose those words for her. She taught the whole building the phrase that morning. He picked up one of the flag signature pages, looked at the tab that said sign here, and set it back down. Nothing's for sale, he said. Meeting at 7 o'clock. Bring the pen. The board convened at 7 o'clock in the same room, and it smelled like cold coffee and consequences. Eleanor walked the directors through it without raising her voice once. The Beacon invoices against real market pricing, 1.9 million skimmed. The phantom warehouse lease. The repriced contracts. The recovered emails, including the one that said none of it matters. Then the recording played, once, all the way through, while Adriana studied the tabletop and the directors studied her. She tried twice. The first time was polish. This is a coordinated misreading of routine transactions, and I'd welcome an independent review. Nobody blinked. Accountants don't misread a gravel lot pretending to be a warehouse. The second time was quieter, and it was aimed at Nathan. Nathan, we can fix this quietly. There's a version of tonight that doesn't embarrass anyone. We're better than a spectacle. Nathan thought about the auditorium that morning, the camera she'd ordered, the microphone pushed at his face on a live stream she'd staged for 300 of his people and every site in the company. You had 11 months to fix it quietly, he said. You spent them renting a stamp of my name. You chose the spectacle this morning. I'm just honoring your production schedule. The vote took 8 minutes by Nathan's watch. 8 minutes to unwind 4 years of borrowed light. Removal for cause. Unanimous. With one abstention from a director who'd golfed with her too often to meet anyone's eyes. The forged delegation went to outside counsel with a referral packet. Her corporate cards died while she was still in the chair. And Diane had not been idle since 11:10 that morning. By the time the vote closed, every Voss hire in the building had been terminated with documented cause. The procurement director who'd waved Beacon's invoices through. The comms chief who'd scrubbed the garage bay out of the orientation video. The chief brand officer with Nathan's parking spot. 6 people, 6 files, 6 clean letters. Fire every one of them isn't rage. When somebody has spent 11 months making sure every single letter would survive a wrongful termination suit, it's housekeeping. Marcus never made it to the meeting. He'd left for the airport when the Ashford folder clicked shut and his badge died at the turnstile on the way out. Clerical errors move fast when the paperwork is honest. Adriana left the building at 8:40. Nathan didn't gloat at the door. He didn't need to, and he didn't want to. He watched from the mezzanine as she crossed the lobby with a single white box, heels ticking on the stone like a slowing metronome. She stopped for a second at the empty stretch of wall where the heritage display used to be, where the garage bay photograph was already back on its hook, because Nathan had asked Ray to re-hang it that afternoon, first thing, before the board, before anything. Sal, a borrowed welder, the sun. Her hand tightened around that silver pin until her knuckles went white. Not the grip of a woman who'd lost a job. The grip of a woman holding the last object that still believed she was in charge. Then she walked out into the rain, and the doors sighed shut. And that was that. Here's what Nathan actually felt, and it's the part the cameras never get. Not triumph. Tiredness. The specific tiredness of setting down something heavy you've carried so long your body forgot it was carrying it. He stood on that mezzanine while the cleaning crew buffed the lobby, and he let out a breath he'd been holding since a Thursday, 11 months before. Then he looked at his watch and left before the directors finished their handshakes, because it was Friday, and Friday has a contract on it. He was home by 9 o'clock. The house smelled like butter. Mrs. Ortega had left a note on the counter in schoolteacher cursive. He ate 4. He negotiated for 5. Milo was on the couch in dinosaur pajamas, hair still damp from his bath, holding the Triceratops book like a briefcase. "Dad, you're late for pancake night." "I know, buddy. Something ran long at work." "Did you have a good day at work?" Nathan sat down next to him. His son, 6 years old, warm as a furnace, smelling like shampoo, the owner of 60 wanted a precision machining company and 0 of a single worry in this world. That was the whole point. That had always been the whole point. "Best one in a while," Nathan said. "Horns up," Milo said. And they read about the Triceratops, and outside, the rain finally stopped. 6 hours. That's what the papers would eventually say it took. They were off by 11 months. But headlines were never built for men like Nathan Cole. Justice, real justice, doesn't arrive like a movie. There's no gavel echoing in a marble hall while music swells. It arrives like machining, pass after pass, each one taking off a little more material until what's left is the true shape of what somebody did. The independent forensic audit took 8 weeks. 2 accountants from an outside firm lived in the conference room with a coffee maker and no sense of humor. When they were done, the number had grown teeth. 2.1 million routed through Beacon and 2 smaller shells. A phantom lease. Contracts repriced below cost to bruise the valuation before the sale. And the centerpiece, framed in exhibit tabs, now instead of investor slides. 1 backdated delegation of voting authority, 1 expired notary, 1 signature stamp that had left the executive safe and found its way on a paper it had no business touching. Eleanor's referral packet went to the U.S. Attorney's Office before Thanksgiving. Wire fraud crosses state lines the moment the money does. And this money had commuted. Marcus went first. They met him at the airport 3 weeks later, boarding a one-way flight to Scottsdale with a laptop he really should have wiped. He was cooperative within the hour, naming his sister by dinner, negotiating like the consultant he'd always pretended to be. His plea came fast. Restitution, forfeiture of the Sewickley condo, and a federal sentence measured in months instead of years, purchased with testimony. Adriana held out longer. Her lawyers were excellent, and for 2 months they produced paper the way the plant produces brackets. But recordings are stubborn things, and Pennsylvania is a one-party consent state, and the woman on that recording had explained her whole philosophy in her own voice at her own gala. When the notary folded and the paralegal who'd fetched the stamp described the drawer, the safe, and the date the paper stopped, she took a plea in spring. Wire fraud, and 1 count tied to the forged instrument. Full restitution, paid in part by the sale of a lake house Nathan had apparently helped buy without knowing it. A permanent bar from serving as an officer or director of any public company. 28 months in a federal facility, followed by supervised release. The judge, a gray-haired woman with a machinist's patience, said something at sentencing that Nathan wrote down on an index card. The defendant did not steal because she lacked money. She stole because she believed the man she was stealing from lacked the standing to object. Standing. Lawyers use that word one way. Nathan uses it another. Both fit. The trade magazine flipped because magazines do. Steel City Executive ran a new cover in April. Nathan's photograph this time, taken in front of the garage bay wall in his actual work jacket, because he declined their stylist. The headline said, "The founder they erased." He didn't frame it. 9 pages, and the only sentence he gave them was this: "I built a company quietly, and quiet got mistaken for absent." That's the whole story. Actually, that's not quite true. He gave 2 sentences, but the second one went to somebody else, the young reporter from the company channel, the one who'd pushed a microphone at him on the worst morning of the whole affair, asked if he'd finally answer her question. Any comment, Mr. Cole? He told her yes. Never apologized for asking the question. It was the only honest part of that broadcast. She runs the communications department now.